Hello my brothers and sisters of the Order, welcome back to the Order. I'm Celtic Templar, and today y'all we are actually getting into the early Germanic warriors. Now, years ago, I believe a year or so ago, I did make a video on the Germanic warriors, but sadly I did leave a lot of historical details out, which if any of y'all want to see the original one, be my guest. I will leave a link in the description and such, and a tag, so that way y'all can see the difference between this one and that one. Other than the house change, I mean. But yeah, the biggest difference is, one, I didn't include the hexagonal shield like this, which is by far one of my favorite styles of shields the Germans use. A lot of people are going to call this a coffin shield. Here's the thing, it's not a coffin shield. This is a hexagonal shield. Why is it called a hexagonal shield? Simple, because it looks like a hexagon. Coffin shields are a lot different. They're more fantasy than they are historically accurate. There's only like 1 or 2 accounts of a coffin shield, and those come from like about the 16th or 15th century. And not from Northern Europe, but actually from that of the southern regions of the Holy Roman Empire, like in Italy, mainly northern Italy, and parts of southern France. So yeah, that's only one of the few differences. And originally when I was first heard of the Germanic warrior, many people don't understand what a Germanic warrior is, where do they come from. Well, our first ever historical accounts of the Germanic warrior actually comes from the accounts mainly from the Cimbri War, with the Cimbri and the Teutones, and the Romans who fought against them during the 2nd century BC. Now, why is this a big deal, and why should we know about it? Well, simple. The Germanic people are a lost historical people in history, and they are by far one of the most mysterious. Now, this video is going to cover the German warrior from the 2nd century BC all the way into the 3rd century AD. Why such a huge difference? Well, simple. We don't actually get a huge... the Romans don't exactly explain in detail of different tribal groups of what they all look like. In fact, pretty much throughout the entire from the 2nd century BC all the way to the 3rd century, the Romans just say, oh yeah, they all look the same. They're all the same, when they probably weren't. But unfortunately, we have to go from historical Roman texts. And you will see me pretty much wearing barely any armor in this video, not just because it's hot outside, but also because that's actually how the Germans fought. They fought lightly armored. And this is pretty much the biggest detail I had to put out there. Now, the weirdest thing I do have to write or describe on what we can understand about the German people is not because... one, the fact that the Romans barely ever wrote anything about them, but the fact is that the Germanic people are, well, would later become known as the Foederati, in which would actually be part of the Roman military, and which would also be the downfall of the Roman military. Now, what is a German, you might ask? Where did they come from? Well, the thing is, we don't actually have an actual idea on detail of what is a German and what is not a German. The Romans give accounts that the term German actually comes from the word ger, meaning the land of the spearmen, which, kind of seeing the fact of how historically these guys, actually majority of them had spears rather than swords, and it sounds like it. But from historical detail, from what I can understand, the Germanic people fought basically as though it would be like that of, well, fighting with a form of honor in their veins, in which there are accounts that bowmen and even those of slingers even had some sort of projectile weapons or something like that, would also give charge onto their opponents rather than retreat. It's possibly this is a form of symbolism or a form of honor that we can later see in later centuries with that of the Saxons, to Jutes, the Angles, and such. Or even that in later on centuries with the Franks, the Goths, the Vandals, as well. And when I speak of Goths, I mean the Ostrogoths and Visigoths as well even the Vandals and even the Lombards and such. Now, this is only And these are only a small fraction of the Germanic people. In fact, the Swabian knot, for example, is the biggest example that we can understand of the Germanic hairstyle. In fact, the Romans do give accounts of the Swabian actually having knots on the side of the head. Now, I don't grow out my hair, so I'm not going to do that. But the Swabian knot was probably a symbolism, meaning of if they were married or not. As the Romans do state that the majority of the fighting men of ages somewhere between that of 30 and 40 years old had a knot on one side, while those of the younger generation had a knot on the other side, meaning like somewhere between like 12 and such, or even 18. Possibly when they weren't married, they still had it on one end, while those of married men probably had it on the other. This, though, is just a Roman account, so I can't say if this is true or not. But from what we can understand of historical detail on the Romans and the Germans, the Romans do give accounts of these men basically being savages, is the best way I can put it. And the thing is, though, that might not be true, because the Romans are not exactly the best of detail on historical information, especially when it comes to their enemies. Because, yeah. But the biggest type of battles that we do know of do come from that of the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest, for example, is the biggest one of them all. However, there are other battles that the Romans and the Germans did fight in. But there are so many, I can't exactly say. But the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest is the biggest one, and I'm just going to say that to the least, is one of my favorites, because it does show the Romans getting their butts kicked. But also, take a look in the Cimbrian War, and you also see the Romans losing battle after battle until finally they won. Only like once or twice, and that's about it. And that's about brought the end of the war. But why don't we get right into this video, and you can see why the Germanic people need to be more talked about, shall we? The clothing of the Germanic people was described to be of a multiple of bright colors, as the Romans do give accounts of bright multicolored tunics, and have even stated on how the fabric would either be made out of linen or wool. The Romans give accounts of the Germanic warriors wearing a form of binded leg wraps, of which were made out of wool, possibly to keep the feet and legs warm in the harsh climate, all the while wearing a form of a closed-toe shoe, or some accounts even give that of an open-toe shoe, being that of a single sheet of leather. When it came to wearing male armor, a warrior would wear a form of woolen tunic underneath, possibly to add a form of padding. After such a shirt of mail would be worn over, it is believed that this was copied from the Celts from Gaul, but little information is known if this is true, as only the forms of the noble class could afford such armor, and most of the time this armor would have been of a sleeve design rather than that of the Lorica Hamata, as we later know. There are accounts of scale armor being used by the Eastern Germanic people. The reason why only the eastern regions of Germania were known to have worn scale armor is possibly due to economic and trade, as one, ringmail was commonly seen in central and western Germania, while eastern Germania used that of scale armor, as it was more commonly seen in the lands such as that of the Slavic people in the east. There are accounts that every Germanic warrior used a form of a small type of utility knife. It is believed that these were actually an everyday style tool, so and such, not exactly the big long knives that we know from later centuries, but in such an everyday working tool for everyday life. The swords were a very rare weapon that were used by the Germanic people, as it was believed that by the 1st century BC, only 1 in every 10 warriors had a sword, while by the 3rd century AD, 4 out of 10 used a sword. The swords that were used varied from user to user, as the further west you would have gone, the more likely you would have seen that of Latin-style swords, possibly from Gaul, while that of more of Central and Eastern Germania, you would have seen that of the Germanic war knife, in which did come in a variety of sizes and shapes and designs. However, some historians do count in calling this the Germanic falcata, because it kind of looks like it somehow. However, the most very common of these swords would be of that of a Roman style of design, shape, and design, as the Germanic people were known to have actually either have taken them from the field of battle or have traded with them for the Roman swords. Roman accounts give a good description of this becoming very illegal by later centuries. Even Roman legionnaires would sell their own swords to the Germans if they could get enough money for them. Somewhere between the 2nd and 3rd century, it became fully illegal, and if a legionnaire was caught selling a said weapon like this, he would be executed. Axes were an everyday tool in which everyday warriors could take to battle. However, there are accounts of wealthier noblemen using axes with designs and symbols, possibly to show their prowess on the field of battle. War clubs were the everyday tool and weapon of an everyday warrior. Such in fact, if one could not afford a sword or an axe, he would use a war club. These were very effective weapons, in which the Roman military do give accounts of how their bodies had been broken underneath and through their armor. The Romans do give accounts of the helmets that were used, that they were of a mix of designs, from that of a bowl-shaped design. However, other accounts also state that of a cullis or even that of a Martitifino design, possibly from the Gallic region. The Romans also give accounts of these helmets also being covered with a form of animal hides and feathers, possibly to be a form to show off in the field of battle. But a lot of times the Romans do state that German warriors would wear no form of helmet at all, possibly because they prefer to show off on the field of battle, as there are accounts of them even having their long flowing hair showing off. Romans give accounts, though, of the majority of Germanic warriors wearing that of cloaks on the field of battle. It is highly possible that the Germans would have believed that the cloak was actually a perfect type of form of garment for armor, as it might have been made out of a thick wool design. However, it's little known if this is true or not. The Romans give accounts of a huge mix of designs of shapes and sizes of shields, as it's stated that there were small and large, rounded, oval, square, and even that of the infamous hexagonal shape. The Romans also give accounts of the shield bosses being that of a projected point, possibly to be used as a secondary impact weapon. The spear was a primary weapon of the Germanic warrior, in which many historians state that this weapon would actually give the land of Germania its name, in which the Germanic people were known to be called the land of the spearmen. as this was the most primary weapon of the German warrior. The javelin was an everyday style of tool and weapon, both to be meant for hunting and fighting. And in fact, it is believed that this was actually the main primary weapon of the Germanic people. Some accounts even state that German warriors would have even used light-handed spears or javelin, which were so short but yet light that they could easily, nimbly thrust and then hurl the projectile into the opponent. Slings and bows do give their accounts that were used on the field of battle, but it has actually been stated that these were mostly used by the light-footed, or in this case, levy troops, as these were mostly that of an everyday style tool for the hunter and herder of the Germanic people. So, in other words, possibly meant for the most poor type of military unit.
Quello gwyn ba na mua, quello gwyn ba, quello gwyn ba na mua, quello gwyn ba. Tant dire au dire, tant dire à tant dire au dire, tant dire à tant. Quello gwyn a luf, hwnna gyf, quello gwyn a luf, quello gwyn a luf, hwnna gyf, quello gwyn a luf. Tant dire au dire, tant dire à tant dire au dire, tant dire à tant. Quello gwyn a gal na gafal, quello gwyn a gal. Quello gwyn a gal na gafal, quello gwyn a gal. Tant dire au dire, tant dire à tant dire au dire, tant dire à tant. Galdit que fadel di pestel, galdit que fadel, galdit que fadel di pestel, galdit que fadel. Tant dire au dire, tant dire à tant dire au dire, tant dire à tant. When did Breton a gallon, when did Breton, when did Breton a gallon, when did Breton. Tant dire au dire, tant dire à tant dire au dire, tant dire à tant. gevret, gwena gwada red, gwena gwada red, en gevret, gwena gwada red. Tant dire, tant dire, tant dire, tant. Gwen a guadrus, gwen a guadrus, gwen a guadrus, gwen a guadrus. Tant dire, tant dire, tant dire, tant. Guadrus a gwen a wen, guadrus a gwen. Guada chala wed a wared, guada chala wed. Tant dire, tant dire, tant dire, tant. Guada gwen e vis, a guadris, guada gwen e vis. Gwen a guada fev, ne baev, gwen a guada fev. Tant dire, tant dire, tant dire, tant. Din din do darim gone, oh. Din din do darim gone is on. Rullestre plegamar, rullestre plegamar. E well you gwen got digo. Din din do darim gone, oh. Din din do darim gone is on. De gwetan outro yanendro, de gwetan outro yanendro. De gwete odazi walevro. Din din do darim gone, no. Din din do darim gone is on. De ventivat da vretonet, de ventivat da vretonet. Amalos rus da chalawet. Din din do darim gone, no. Din din do darim gone is on. En or da gwena du, en or da gwena du. Ad adre duria malos rus. Din din do darim gone, no. Din din do darim gone is on. Din din do darim gone, din din do darim gone is on. Rullestre plegamar, rullestre plegamar. E well you gwen got din din da darim da darim da din din da darim da nizam Egwedan out ho yanin ho Egwedan out ho yanin ho Egwede odazi wanevo din din da darim da darim da din din da darim da nizam Eventivat navretonet, eventivat navretonet Amalos rus da chalawet Din din do darem go no Din din do darem go nizom En or da gwena du En or da gwena du Adadre tur yamalos rus Din din do darem go no Din din do darem go nizom
Flan for din ichi kokıç
Well, hopefully you all liked that as much as I did. Like, comment, and subscribe, and as well to help the channel grow. As well, y'all, if y'all have any type of warriors from history that you want me to cover, like that of the Germans and such, or even that of medieval history and such, or the Irish, the Scots, the Welsh, the English, or even the French, or as well the Roman Empire, let me know in the comments below, as we will be covering from their beginning all the way till about the 16th century. As well, y'all, we will actually be getting into other countries as well, like the Russians, and as well the Scandinavian culture, the Ottomans, and various other regions. Anyways, guys, let me know in the comments below of what y'all want to see next, and help this channel grow so that way we can actually help people more understand more about history. Now, if y'all excuse me, I gotta go raid the Roman frontier in Germania. See y'all soon, y'all.